So she wanted the theme of the party to be a sort of 1960s suburban hostess thing. And we were throwing out words like midlife go-go and psychedelic suburbia.
It was nothing like that.
Well, at this party it was. And as such, the food was going to be all Jell-O molds and casseroles and things on a stick. And it was, we all wore kind of really great vintage. And afterwards, we were sitting around, and she said, you and I need to sit down and write a screenplay that ends with a party just like this, because we love foodie movies, especially like Eat, Drink, Man, Woman and Babette's Feast. And I'm like, yeah, let's write a foodie movie. And it never happened. I mean, we took notes on it, and it kind of went away. And a couple of years ago, well, I never forgot the idea. I still loved the concept. I decided, you know what, I'm going to write something about this. And I opened up my laptop, and I thought, well, I'm just going to start with thinking of a recipe. And the first thing that popped into mind, which actually wasn't even at her shower, was Twinkie Pie. And I had never made it, and I didn't know what was in it other than Twinkies. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to start writing down what I think a recipe would be. And this voice came out, and this voice was just like, okay, so when you make the Twinkies, you have to make sure to save the maraschino cherry juice so that you soak the Twinkies in it, and the cream inside turns the exact color of Cherries in the Snow lipstick, which was my mama's favorite lipstick and the only one she'd ever wear. And then I stopped, and I was like, oh, this is a story about a young girl. She's starting to sound kind of Southern. And it looks like her mama's not around anymore. And that's kind of how it happened. Wow. And then it was from there.
That's wonderful. And actually, I think I'm going to connect it to my next question. I'm going to jump around a bit, is that talking of young women, the title of this is about young women in plot seats. So each of your most recent books is centered around a young woman at a particular point in her life. And can you speak to what the timing means for this young person, your character? I think they're in different places, and if it has a basis in real life, by all means mention that.
Oh, we're so polite. Okay, I'll jump in. I'm going to cheat a little bit with this question, if I'm allowed, because we saw the questions ahead of time, and I was thinking, Emily Windsnap goes through. She is at an important point of her life, and there's lots of things changing, and she, throughout the books, but my cheat is that I've got another book, and you did say your latest book, so it's kind of not quite cheating, because it is my latest book, it just isn't quite out yet. And it came out in the UK this year in May, and it's coming out in June next year, and it's actually my first young adult novel, and I've got a galley, and I think it looks beautiful. It's called Read Me Like a Book, and I want to talk about this one, because actually this is a book that is very dear to my heart. It was in fact the first book I ever wrote, and it got rejected by everybody about 15 years ago. And it's about a girl coming to terms with her sexuality and coming out as gay. And a couple of years ago, quite a few things happened to me that made me think, or there was stuff going on, and I wanted to really try again to get this book out there. And I was very fortunate that my publisher, both in the UK and Penderwicks in the States, were 100% behind it, and the world is behind it. And so I think that this is a girl who's really going through a crucial point in her life. It's partly based on my own experiences. I kind of came out publicly about a year before the book came out. I married my partner, and I've just come out to a room full of American teachers. Wasn't actually planning that bit. I'm shaking. And so it's a crucial point in the girl's life. I've had really lovely responses to it in the UK so far, and I feel excited to be part of Movement of People, not only about diversity, which we've heard about today, which is really important, but hopefully, there was so much that was said before that I thought was fantastic, and people do need to see themselves reflected, but I think that and I think that I hope that this book will be something that's important in the turning points of the lives of readers who read it, as well as the character going through it. Anyway, that was a lot of waffle, which was basically me just saying, I'm excited about my new book.
And thank you. And I think if you want to throw out something about a different book at any moment, you should do that. I just, this is the most recent books. I wanted to give you an opportunity, but I thought that was fabulous. Liz mentioned she was going to do this right before we started. I think it's great.
Oh, you did? She told you she was just her.
Just as we sat down. That was just great.
How do you follow that? Tell us a secret that you've never said.
Adam, do you know any of my secrets?
Not telling.
Yeah. I was thinking that because I think of my Penderwick books as really one big volume, the fourth book is what I consider Act 2 in this story. The first three books were Act 1, Act 2. I'm working on Act 3 now and it'll be done. So the fourth book, Batty is the major protagonist along with her brother Ben, but it's really a certain point in the family's life that I'm dealing with at that point. There was a wound that happened years before the stories started that reverberated through the sisters' lives, and in the first three books you could see traces of that wound, especially in the relationship between two of the sisters. And this was the book where I had to address that wound and at least address it, not heal it, so that I could go on to the third act, which is so much more fun to write. So it was a specific time in Batty's life, but I keep these books. I'm strictly staying within middle grade, so I keep the major protagonist, the major point of view, always within that age group. So for those of you who've read the books, you can figure out, since I'm jumping time to the fifth book, who the protagonist is going to be. And you're all sitting there like, what is she talking about? It's Lydia. There, remember that, it's a question later on the test.
I love middle grade. Middle grade books range, the range is so wide. You have your 8-year-olds, and then you go up to your 12 going on 13-year-olds, and it's a stretch of time that's so tumultuous. And your middle grade readers and protagonists are going through such extremes. I mean, you're like sponges. You're soaking up so much knowledge, and you're craving so much independence, and yet you don't really quite have that yet. Like, you're still not allowed to do so many things because you're still, you're kind of at that child, almost becoming a preteen stage. I think about my protagonist, Gigi, who is 12, and she's at a stage where everything is changing, not just her age and her body, but her whole life. She moves, she goes to a new school, a new home. She and her sister enter a cooking contest, and they win $1 million. Their lives completely change. And I think in this sort of trying to navigate your way through all the changes, what my protagonist ends up doing is creating, along with all the recipes in the book, she has her own recipe, which is a recipe for success. And I think it's sort of her way of trying to solidify and find a path through this time. And it's, I think, going on that journey, just as a writer of middle grade, you start to remember everything, and it's so easy to kind of relive and touch right back to that place.
Well, Joan is 14, but she's playing 18 all through the book. So she's kind of in the middle of being 14 and being 18, and in some ways being a little young for 14, and in other ways being older. And I think part of that is because I teach. And when you teach, you notice that the big kids don't get away with much, because you look at them and you just sort of think, well, that's a big kid and he should know better. And she's a big girl and she should be mature. And not necessarily. Whereas, the little monsters like me, our problem is being taken seriously, but on the other hand, we get away with a lot. So I wanted to write about not a little woman, but a big girl. And Joan is big and convincingly 18 and hormonally 18, but she's still 14, and I thought that was interesting. So she's really stretched out on the Procrustean bed of adolescence and suffering. And of course, when somebody's suffering, that makes it much easier for a story to be funny.
So one of the things in reading everybody's books is that with you two, even though you did it very differently, you were both very courageous about showing really bad parents, like really bad parents. And I wondered if you...
Yeah, but you show good parents, which is uncharted territory.
And that's because it's fiction. No, but I wondered if, how hard that was. Did you feel scared about writing about, did you feel like people were going to get angry about that father or that poor drunk mother? Or and I shouldn't feel sorry for her, I don't at all. Do you have any blowback?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I think that for me, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, I'm really only going to write if it is scary, and if it is coming from my heart, and
It's scary for you.
for me,
Right.
only because I'm only really interested in exploring that side. I don't think I'm ever going to sort of trip lightly into a story. And even though my book has a beautiful fluffy cover and it's called The Truth About Twinkie Pie, it's quite dark. It has and I don't really have any interest in staying in a safe surface place. I really only want to kind of explore the dark nooks and crannies, and I don't know if you guys are like this, I cry all the time when I write. It's kind of where I know I'm kind of hitting something. And
I try to laugh.
Yeah, I do that too.
Oh, okay.
It's a little scary in my office. I like going to that place. Maybe it's natural for me, but that's where I'm more interested in being.
Was that hard to access that dad?
No, but I was worried that he might cross over into melodrama. I had to get her off of the farm.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I think if she'd had an ordinarily affectionate father, she would have slaved away on the farm for the rest of her life, because that's what people did. So I needed her to have...
Oh, you did him very well.
A compelling reason to leave the farm and explore the world. And, at one point I do remember kind of sitting down and saying, what do you have against this girl? And sat down with my journal and wrote, my name is Josiah, and so he told his side of the story in my notebook, until I had a better sense of him. And
Did he have good reasons for behaving so terribly?
he thinks he does, but actually, if you notice, he's pretty nasty to his sons too. I think he's a sullen, joyless bully of a man, and what he would think would be a reason is really only a justification.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Do you have anything to say about parents?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
But
I've got all sorts of parents.
you also put a baby at risk in a really interesting way, but then pulled it off.
Which book was that? Talking about me. When did I do that? Oh, okay. No, when I think about it, I do have a dad who was in prison under the ocean, I suppose.
Right, but I mean,
But that's
okay.
He's nice. He's lovely. I actually had a friend who fancied Emily Windsnap's dad and came to me and she was like, "Is it weird that I've got a bit of a crush on the father of the main character of a book in a child's?" Anyway. He's in prison. He makes jewellery. He's like, he's so sensitive.
Well, I think I didn't have these questions, but I think it's interesting how parents, you either work against your own experience with parents and in your stories, or you create parents you would like to have or did have, and I think just interesting in terms of thinking of the books you've written and knowing a little bit about you. Something I also thought that was really interesting was each book has such developed worlds in terms whether it's Under the Sea with the Mermaids or, religious practices in 1911 Baltimore or the recipes and so forth, and the Penderwicks in terms of music. And I was curious about the research that you did for all these books.
Did you eat those things?
All of them?
I'll say that researching recipes is really, really fun. Luckily, and interestingly enough, kids, whenever I do school visits, kids are so sure that I have this incredible sweet tooth, and I'm kind of not. I'm more like salty, I guess. I don't know. But so I had a lot of desserts that I researched, and that I thought all the recipes in the book pertain emotionally to the chapters that precede them. And so I was looking for very specific recipes. What helped me out with my research is that I do have a teenage son with teenage friends, and so there was always a huge swarm of these huge hungry boys in the house, and they were my testers. But researching for this in particular was really fun. Even though I never lived in the South. My father lived in the South for years. Both of my brothers did. A lot of my best friends are down there. And I really loved that part of the research. I loved going and talking to families and finding out about their recipes. I actually replicated the trip that my protagonist takes on a train. I kind of immersed myself in it, and it was one of my joys of the process.
Yeah, I really like this question, by the way, Monica, and it takes a nonfiction writer to ask us, because I don't get asked this a lot as a fiction writer about research. But yeah, the music, when I started writing the third book, even before the beginning, I knew I was going to have to immerse myself in music, because Batty was going to get her connection to music in that one, and I knew that was going to be a theme through the end of the series. And because she was starting at 5, and I remember being connected to music at 5. Back then it was lots of Frank Sinatra 45s, Come Fly With Me. So what I did is I got an iPod, they were pretty new back then, and I started loading on songs that I loved to listen to, like the kind of song that when it comes on a radio, you just start to dance to. Fast Car was one of them, Tracy Chapman. And I realized that what I responded to most was rhythm, which goes back to the panel that I had with Rita, and we danced, and I was kind of I'd been on 2 or 3 panels since no one will dance, except for Rita. So I've been having to immerse myself in what I love about music and why, so that then I can take that through and put it into Batty, which is really, 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 really fun.
I've got a music connection as well. I usually have a playlist, so I think the iPhone is quite a big part of the process. The last book for me that I was writing, which is going to be my second young adult book, it's called Haunt Me, and basically I put together a playlist of it just sort of came together. There was about 40 songs on this, and as I've been writing it, which has been over this year, I would go out and I'd walk my dog, and I'd be listening to Hurt by Christina Aguilera or something, and I'd be seeing this boy's, because it's a love story between a ghost, a boy who's dead and a girl who's alive, and I was seeing his funeral, and his mum was singing the first verse to him, his brother was singing, and then the last bit was him singing back, and I'd go out walking the dog, and every day I'd come back in tears, floods of tears, because I would see these scenes of this book coming to life, and I've never actually had an experience like that before this year, but that's been amazing. But in terms of research, I always, quite a lot of my books start with the setting, and if it doesn't start with the setting, then the setting's always important, and I always feel that I need to go to the right place for my books. Luckily, one of my books was set in the Bermuda Triangle, so I had to go to Bermuda, because I take my research seriously. But to be fair, I spent 2 weeks going snorkeling, and every day I'd go out snorkeling, I'd see the most amazing fish in the water, I'd come out of the water and I'd sit on the beach, literally I wouldn't even go home, sit on the beach, write down everything I saw, and it all went in the book. I've been to the Arctic on a ship for the Land of the Midnight Sun. to experience what that was like. I've been to a deserted village that had been completely destroyed by a storm to research for North of Nowhere, which has a village that was destroyed by a storm. So I have to have at least one moment during the process of feeling that I'm in the right place for the book. It might not be the exact place, but it has to feel like the place. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm making it home, which I guess I am. But I'd like to have a sense of the setting. It's a really big thing for me.
I didn't have a lot of, I had lots of books on servants in the Jewish community in Baltimore, but I think the two books I looked at most were Mrs. Esther Levi's cookbook, because she, I could get my mind around the kosher. I always had to think about what are the Rosenbachs having to eat, and whether, I can have a milk dish or not, so there was that. And then the other thing that I really relied on was the 1908 Sears Roebuck catalog, because one of the things that I realized as I was writing about the book is that the book is partly about money. And so knowing what things cost was really helpful for me. I did at one point consider washing the kitchen floor with newspaper and vinegar the way Joan did, but then I decided it wasn't necessary.
Laura, why did you decide to start her off in Lancaster or near Lancaster? I thought it was because then it was an easy way to get to Baltimore, which is where you are, but I wondered why specifically.
My sister-in-law comes from a farming family in Lancaster.
But not Dutchy.
No, Mennonite.
Oh, okay, that's Dutchy, yeah.
Well, when you say you didn't want to wipe the floor, I'm thinking of these women who lived the Victorian life. There's been some viral stuff recently, but I've also, wearing corsets and all that sort of thing. Sort of. At any rate,
can I just ask on the subject of research, because I'm interested. I've got there's a book that I'm going to be starting maybe next year or the year after. It's basically based on my dad's escape from the Nazis in the 1930s, and I've never done anything like this before, and I've always felt quite happy with the fact that if you write about mermaids and fairies and time travel, then no one can tell you you've definitely got it wrong, so you can kind of make it up as you go along. But when you're writing about 1930s pre-Nazi Vienna, then it's not so easy. So not now, because I know there's lots of questions, but if anyone sees me, I'm here all day, and has got any advice on how to do historical research like that, and not get lots of letters telling me that you got it wrong, I would be really grateful.
Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that. You can't stop the letters.
No, but I just
do you want to say anything about that, Laura?
I just was thinking, in my experience, if there's always someone who knows. And the more obscure the information is, the more they're dying to tell someone. So if you can find the person who knows, they will want to tell you.
So there's one person? I have to find that person?
I think there might be more than one.
It's in Aruba.
Okay.
I think I'll just ask one more of these questions, and then we'll open it up to you and to the audience. It's the secondary characters. I think you all have really wonderful secondary characters, and I wondered if you'd like to speak about one or more of them in the most recent book, or another book that you particularly love, or how it came about, or something.
You start this time.
I love making up characters. I could make up characters until the cows came home, were milked, spent the night in their stalls, went out the next morning. I hate plot. So I was really happy to have, the diary form kind of lends itself to characters, and I enjoyed almost everybody in this book. I'm a little in love with Mr. Rosenbach. And I think what a friend pointed out to me, and I was very appreciative, because books contain patterns of which the writer is usually unaware, that at the end of the book, Joan's greatest defenders are Malka the crone and Mimi the minx. So the oldest person in the book and one of the very youngest people of the book sort of move in to defend Joan. But I had a great time spending time with the characters, and it's an odd book in a way because once you get past the father, it doesn't have a villain.
I love writing characters too. It's interesting. The character, people often ask me who the hardest character to write is, and I always say that it was Mace, who is, she's an Asian girl at the school, and it never ceases to annoy me how people are so surprised that I had trouble writing the Asian character. But she's so, right? She's so entirely different from me that I think. The other thing that I loved is that there were two Asian characters in this book, God forbid, because usually if there's a diverse character, sort of the one token person. And people would ask me why Mace was so hard to write, and I would say, well, she's the popular, beautiful, mean girl. And I was the nerdy, dorky girl. And it was a difficult one for me to kind of get around until I figured out all her little kind of insecurities and all the interesting things about her. And I loved that I got to also write a completely different Asian character and have them exist in the same world, in the same book. And it's something that actually a lot of people have come up to me and said, oh, you have two Asians in the book. You know, I'm like, yeah, because sometimes when you go to schools, middle schools, there's more than one of us. So that was a real, I really enjoyed that. And I just sort of base it on the world as I see it. I didn't realize so many people would kind of mention it to me.
My favorite sub-character, I have to talk about him because my beloved editor is here. Michelle, where are you? Oh, there you are. I knew you were there. Nick Geiger, who was based a little bit on my nephew Nick. Nick Geiger in the fourth book comes home from Afghanistan in the middle of the book, and my nephew Nick was in Afghanistan. He did 2 tours of duty while I was writing the book, and I didn't know if he was going to come home safe, but I would send pictures of the real Nick to Michelle, who properly fell in love with him because he's absolutely gorgeous. And I wrote a scene pretty much just for her about Nick in a wet t-shirt. And I love putting scenes like that into books for my middle grade kids because they're going to be like, oh, he's dripping. But later, they'll get it.
In the Emily Windsnap series, there's a kind of little cast of characters who come back in most of the books. There's Mystic Millie, who tells fortunes on the pier, does hypnotism and kind of wears big capes and says things like, your aura's looking very purple today, things like that. She's a complete phony, but every now and then it sort of works. She loves Earl Grey. Actually, I was with my publicist Tracy this week, and I was testing her on her Emily Windsnap knowledge. So I was like, what's Mystic Millie's favourite drink? She's like, I don't know. I said, it's the same as mine. And she went, oh, champagne. No, not that favourite. The other favourite. Okay, Earl Grey tea. So Mystic Millie, and then there's Mr. Beeston, who's a baddie. And what I like about having this cast of quite quirky characters is that, I love characters, but I love plot just as much. And when coming back to write a new Emily Windsnap, but when I'm doing number 6, because they're quite quirky and they all have their own personalities, they kind of write some of the book for you, because you put someone like that in a situation and you kind of know it's quite easy to figure out how. Well, actually, nothing's easy. None of it's easy. Who am I kidding? But when you've got a character like that, then it can help you to think, oh, I know how they might act, because you know them well because they're quirky and different. So I like that about them.
I'm just going to give you one chance because a couple of you had mentioned questions of your own, and do you want to do that before I open it up to the audience? Any questions for each other?
I do, because, and then I mentioned it to you, and you said you had the same question, that it feels a little strange to be on a panel that's called about girls, because there's this whole cultural war going on. She said very broadly, don't yell at me, that girls are not supposed to be the default in middle grade books, and so we're sort of not allowed to talk about girls in middle grade books, and yet here we are put together as though it's a strange grouping. I'm not saying this at all well. If somebody could help me with it.
I'd love to, but I'm not sure what you
That's the problem, isn't it? I mean, I would love to sit up here and talk about girl power and stuff, but it almost feels like we're not allowed to anymore. Maybe that's what I'm talking about, and maybe I'm bringing up something way too big.
I've never been told that, but the one thing that I find slightly frustrating, and I'm saying this after doing 10 days of school visits and bookshop events, is that my books they've mostly got a bit of pink or purple or sparkles or mermaids or fairies on the covers. And even though once you start reading the books, Emily Windsnap I think that she's a really good role model for girls. She's not a girly kind of mermaid at all. She has to fight with sea monsters. She has to get past hammerhead sharks to rescue her dad from underwater. She's a action girl, she's a kind of action girl, tomboy mermaid, but the boys will still not pick it up, and they won't be seen to. So the thing that frustrates me, and this isn't really what you're asking, but the thing that frustrates me is that girls can be seen reading a book about a boy, but there's still a stigma about boys reading a book about a girl, and I think we should try and change that. Is that it?
No,
Do either of you, anybody want to
well, you would
respond to
agree
either
with
of
me.
these?
Now you're looking at me like I'm crazy. But what a setup.
I'm trying to think if I could possibly. I know what you're saying, because the title of this panel almost makes it feel as if, there are girls in the plot driver's seat.
Right.
Whereas, I don't know percentages or anything of books, but there are many
97.
many girls. Yes, that is true.
Right.
There are many girls who drive plots, and I think this is what you're trying to hit on. And it's not something that's. And I was saying I love talking about this, but it really is what's out there, and I think maybe what you're trying to say is it's more owning that it's already there, and it's part of what drives our whole industry. Are the girls in the plot driver's seat? Is that where you were going with it? I'm not sure.
Well, when I first started the Penderwicks, I looked around, and this was like the mid to late 90s, and everybody, the submissions and everything, they were talking about books for boys and multicultural books. That was all, and I thought, wow, aren't I allowed to write for girls anymore? And I am a girl, so it's been an interesting ride with that, and now it feels like putting us all together. It feels like we're making a statement about why write for girls. Is that an important thing? Is that a good thing?
That's interesting, because I wasn't thinking of it as we were writing for girls so much as the girls happen to be driving the plots. And I think that girls that drive plots can be for girls, or they're just for humans, in general. So for girls or boys. And
I totally agree with that. But I decided way back then that I wasn't going to make concessions to try to get to those boy problem readers that everybody was talking about.
I think that you can only really write exactly the way that you feel and sincerely. So I agree with that too. I mean, it would be great if we could. I mean, in an ideal world, you think, I would love to solve the boy problem reader issue and this and and all those things. But I think you can only really write the book that only you can write.
Yeah.
Right.
And if it is in your if it's in your soul and your heart to solve that, then it's going to come out naturally. But if not, then you just write your book.
This is your first. I'll probably make a mistake here, but you've Splendors and Glooms. There were boy and girl, and did this feel different to you, having one young woman? Because you said you wanted to have just one.
No, A Drowned Maiden's Hair is almost all
That's
women.
right.
There's almost no, I mean, I think there's one poor devil in one of the seances. But it's a very female book. And when there was a little bit of nosing around for a movie, that one of the things they were talking about was, putting in males. And so this one didn't feel different to me. I think I'm more conscious of the different when I'm trying to write from a male point of view because I can't automatically step back and say, well, of course a girl could feel those things because I felt those things and I'm a girl. But of course, when you're writing about a boy, you are actually writing about a human being. So I can still step back and say, well, of course he could feel those things because he's a human being.
Thanks. That's a great little sidebar, whatever. I'd like to open it up for a few minutes to questions from the audience, if there's time.
I just have a question for Liz. When you mentioned that the boys were reluctant to pick up your books on your recent book tour,
Yeah.
does that seem to be cultural, or do you have the same experience in the UK?
No, it's been all the way through my career, really. But yeah. Other than the North of Nowhere, which is, there's no pink, there's no mermaids, there's no fairies, there's nothing on the cover that says girl in any way. In fact, it's dark blue and green, and there's a boat on the sea in a storm. And I have noticed that boys are happier to hold that in their hand and put it in front of me and not mind me writing their name in it as opposed to saying it's for their sister. Yeah, it's not culture. I mean, it's cultural, but it's world cultural rather than here.
And it's packaging.
Right.
I mean,
It's packaging, but also I think it's
all
the
my
author's
boys at
name.
school read The Hunger Games,
Yeah.
and it doesn't look like a girl book.
Right.
Oh, definitely, because my book is so pink. It's so pink. And it was something that I thought about when it first came out. I love the cover of it, but I remember thinking, oh, this is so pink, and there's mystery in it and adventure, and there's so much going on, but I feel like, are people just going to look at it and see all that pink frosting?
I think what I found,
Yeah.
we used to, I go to a lot of children's authors things in the UK, and we did at one point think, oh, this is the pink corner, and I thought, I don't, because there was a few of us there, and I didn't want to be in the pink corner. But sometimes it can be a way of, you draw them in, you draw in these unsuspecting readers who think it's just going to be pink. And actually the books themselves, mine aren't, and yours certainly sounds like it isn't at all. And to be fair, the Hunger Games, I mean, when the kind of the heart of a book is teenagers all murder each other, I don't think you're going to have a problem getting the boys in. I mean, I don't think that's worrying too much about the main character, because they don't need to be embarrassed about reading a book about a female main character when that's the premise, I don't think.
Could I address the cultural thing? That was you.
This is a totally non-scientific thing, but when I did events for this book in Boston and New England, I would have up to 30% boys who were reading the book, and when I was out in Kansas, there were none. And that's my scientific research, but it felt different, the Republicans.
Miriam? Wait.
The anti-feminist feeling of the times, that we can't have girly books?
Are we living in anti-feminist times?
The political climate in this country.
Oh, right, okay. I thought you meant we were being anti.
Oh, no!
Oh.
Yeah. You especially.
I was going to say something.
I'm just
Are you asking them, are we living in anti-feminist times? Is that the question?
That's influencing.
It's a comment about that. You guys would show it.
Oh, yes.
I'm curious about a formative library experience growing up that you may have had that plays into these strong female characters that you write about.
Finding E. Nesbit on the shelves, and C.S. Lewis. Is Beth Gebhardt here? Oh, there. Hi. I grew up in Stratford and went to Radnor Library. So, yeah, and it was the old one. Yeah, it was all those wonderful books about girls, The Borrowers.
I don't remember particularly reading books about. I read My Naughty Little Sister. I don't know if you knew that because I could relate to that quite a lot. And I read. Yeah, I don't know. The Secret Seven. I suppose that influenced me a lot. We used to go on adventure. We used to see mysteries everywhere. I don't think I remember particularly thinking these are girls or boys' books. I don't know. I don't think that felt like it was part of my awareness back then.
Yeah,
And it shouldn't be now.
Yeah, I don't remember thinking of, like C.S. Lewis, definitely for me. I actually remember the moment that I first saw the Chronicles of Narnia, and I still have that same box set, the 70s one with the really cool illustrations. I still have that one. I think that I wasn't even thinking in terms of boys and girls, but more the shared experience.
Yeah.
Because when I think of books that, like, I always think of Lord of the Rings, and I really connected so much to to Frodo and trying to survive difficult times and fight against something that seemed impossible. And that's probably from my own history and things that I've been through. But I think I connected more with we were kind of talking about this earlier. I think I connect more with the elements that somebody has to go through, the difficult times, and how to navigate that, and regardless of who the protagonist or who the hero was.
Are there more questions? I have a little game I want to play, sort of thing. That I hope it doesn't fall flat. I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago, and this was done. I was a panelist, and I thought it was kind of neat. So I thought if there was time to do it, it's called the Pivot Questionnaire. Maybe you know about it. It's 10 questions that originally came from a French series, Bouillon de Culture, hosted by Bernard Pivot. Better known as the questions that James Lipton asks every guest at the end of the inside the Actors Studio show. So I'm not sure I should ask all of them if they're middle grade friendly, but nonetheless, here we go. So you can pass if you want, but here's the first one. What is your favorite word? I don't think you're supposed to spend too much time thinking about it.
Discombobulate. Because it's just fun to say.
Actually.
You're going to say actually.
It is
Word is
actually.
The first thing that comes to mind is beloved.
Rosemary.
What is your least favorite word?
Puberty.
Moist. It's never right to say that, is it? You said it didn't have to be middle grade friendly.
Yeah.
What was it? Just a horrible moist. Yeah, it's just something about the word moist.
How do you describe really good cake, then?
Yeah. I
That's where you were going with it, obviously.
It's just the word that makes me cringe. What's the next question?
Yeah, brassiere. Yeah, because my mother, right? Because of my mother. You need a brassiere.
I don't like the word flattered. I don't know. Whenever I hear people say it, it sounds so. I'm so flattered. I don't know. I just.
Oh, humbled. That's worse, isn't it? I feel humbled. Sorry. No. Oh no.
I've got words you don't like. Any for you, Laura?
Oh, I already did puberty.
Okay, right. Sorry, right. So,
We were doing so well till this point.
what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I know. For me, that spark that comes when you think that there is no spark or that it's impossible. The kind of spark in darkness. I love that.
Anyone else? What turns you off?
Lack of sleep.
Yeah. The world, I think, in general turns me on. No, that was the first question. I was just taking a long time to think about it. The world turns me on. I'm going home. Can I just say I had to check out of a hotel at 5 o'clock this morning.
You're doing beautifully.
What sound or noise do you love?
My dog snoring.
Beethoven.
Water on water.
think my family laughing.
What sound or noise do you hate?
At the builders next door, it's been going on for 5 months. 9 months. 9 months it's been going on.
Smoke detector.
Oh, yeah. Mean people saying anything.
Yeah. I agree. Like angry or mean voices.
Yeah,
Voices
yeah.
raised in anger or meanness.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I want to design wallpaper.
Artist.
Yeah.
I always thought I should have become a piano tuner. It's noble work.
It's really random, Laura.
You're jumping on me with these sudden questions. What floats to the top?
Okay,
what floats to the top?
Time traveller.
What profession would you not like to do?
Teacher. I didn't want to say. Oh, politician.
Oh, having to make horrible sandwiches. When people spread the mustard on that awful white bread.
Is that a joke?
Mustard spreader.
I don't want to be a mustard deli worker. Yeah, there we go. This last one is, if heaven existed, what would you like to hear God say when you arrived at the pearly gates?
No.
Yes. Let's go.
No.
Want to say no?
I'll answer because I'm about to cry. That my dad's there when you see me.
I'd like him to say, I'm not real.
I guess I'd like him to say we're grading on the curve. You can come in.
Okay, honestly, I'd like to say I am real, actually. You were never quite sure, but I am real.
So thank you.